So good afternoon. We are a bit late, but that's normal in a certain way after lunch. But this doesn't mean that maybe that we have, 20 minutes each one, but maybe 18, something like that, just to have minutes for questions and something else. So very, very quickly presentation. Do you know everything about the framework learning with the world, which is the significance of this, and this is the intention, which is to know the activities of research and collaboration of the European schools with extra European countries, and particularly with what we call emerging countries, and we also calling countries associated with the Global South. That's another interesting definition, which is related to the collaboration among the countries assisting and helping each other in development. So this is something different from just the emerging content. So we have 3 speakers. The first one will be Els Hannes, then Thomas Hilbert, and then Leonardo Madrasso. So I will present very, very quickly Els. Els is the international coordinator of the School of Faculty of Architecture of Hasselt, and she is a PhD in transportation sciences. That's very interesting. Transportation sciences, and program coordinator and international coordinator. Please, Els, that's your. Would you like to speak from here or having
the microphones? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Adalberto, for the introduction. I'm going to present you a design studio that we have developed together with our partner school in Dar es Salaam, Ardi University. And this design studio is on the topic of sustainable ecotourism. But before embarking on our journey to Dar es Salaam, I want to tell you a little bit of the context of our school and of Belgium. Belgium is located where the arrow points at. I'm from the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, from Hasselt University, and Hasselt is a town in the east of the province of Flanders. From a Belgian perspective, we are a school in a remote, quite rural area, but from a European perspective, we're in the heart of Europe. Okay. Our university is the youngest university of Belgium. The university is only 43 years old. And in that university, we are the youngest faculty, because due to an institutional reform, we had to merge into university about 7 years ago. All schools of architecture had to merge into university. Before we were a university college. And that gave us the opportunity to redefine our mission and vision and ambition. It is mentioned there briefly because the text is much longer, of course, but we strive for excellence in an international context. We want to educate students and researchers to have a strong responsibility towards society. We focus on design and artistic creation in an interdisciplinary way, and we make connections in research. This is important to understand why we started with this international studio. We offer some programs in architecture and interior architecture, and in research we have 2 research groups, Arc Research and Mad Research. One is focusing on research in architecture and interior architecture. The other one is focusing on research in the arts. Now, our architecture curriculum is 3+2. 3 bachelor years, 2 master years. In the bachelors, we try to give our students strong roots, a strong foundation. It's a common, very solid curriculum. In the master years, 2 master years, we try to give them wings. They have to find their own voice, and we do that by giving them options, optional courses, by offering them different opportunities. And one of the opportunities is to take part in international activities. It's going abroad for an internship, it's going abroad to study, or it is taking part in an international design studio. Now, this design studio, as in I think all schools of architecture, is the core of our curriculum. And in this design studio, we really want to, of course, educate architects, but we also want to use the design studio as a research laboratorium or an incubator for research. And we focus on topics that are relevant for society. So here you see how the mission and the vision of our faculty is also reflected in the way we approach research by design in the design studio. Okay, this was a little bit of Belgium. Let's go to Tanzania now. Tanzania is a country in Africa, in the southeast of Africa, near the Indian Ocean. And according to the United Nations Human Development Index, it is a country with low human development, while most of European countries are countries with very high human development index. This is the map of Tanzania, and we cooperate with Dar es Salaam. Dar es Salaam is not the capital of Tanzania. The capital is Dodoma, over here, but it is the biggest city of Tanzania. Currently 4.5 million inhabitants, and it is amongst one of the 10th fastest growing cities in the world. 70% of people in Dar es Salaam live in informal settlements. We are cooperating with Ardi University in Dar es Salaam. Ardi University had an opposite movement in their institution. They were part of the University of Dar es Salaam, but in the past 10 years, they moved out of the university and they became a university on their own. And their curriculum in architecture is 5 bachelor years and 2 master years. But after 5 bachelor years, graduated students can enter the profession. The 2 master years are mainly research master years for those students who want to embark on PhD research to go into academia. The language of instruction in Ardi University is English, fortunately. Otherwise, the cooperation would be very difficult. But the main language of speech in Tanzania is Swahili. And you all know Swahili because you all know this phrase, Hakuna Matata, seize the day. It reflects the spirit of Tanzania still. It reflects their joy and the way they approach life. But things are changing. A nice thing in the cooperation with Tanzania is that it has a very stable political climate. Ever since independence and Julius Nyerere, there is democracy. The recently elected President Magufuli has a new baseline for Tanzania, and this is Hapa Kazi Tu, just work, keep working. He wants to fight corruption, and he wants to put all Tanzanians to work. Okay, this was a little bit of introduction, context of Tanzania. Now, how did our cooperation start? Well, this was in line with our mission. We looked for opportunities to start working abroad, and there was a lot of enthusiasm involved of a number of staff in our faculty and also on the side of Tanzania. The very beginning of this project starts with 2 graduated students from our faculty. This is Bram Rumboud. After graduating, he traveled through Africa. He met Father Bolle, who was building a school for orphan girls. And Bram helped him out, and he still runs this organization, Bolle Bolle. Then there was another young enthusiast student in architecture who wanted to do an internship in Tanzania after his 3rd bachelor year. He was so enthusiastic about the country that he asked us if he could make a graduation project in his master's in Tanzania. We said, okay, let's try this. We got in touch with the Brothers of Charity in Kigoma, and because none of our staff was experienced in supervising that kind of graduation projects abroad, we contacted Ardi University in Dar es Salaam to ask if they could well, help us out and assign a co-promoter for this project. And that was Daniel Mbiso. And we invited Dr. Daniel Mbiso to Belgium to take part in the jury, the final jury of the graduation project. Well, and then at the time that Daniel was in Belgium, Vleerwest, this is the Flemish governmental organization that supports inter-university cooperation with the South, under the motto, sharing minds, changing life. They launched a call for projects. And these projects were meant or intended to award seed money to universities that wanted to embark on cooperation in the South. And we could formulate a project of 2 years, and the maximum budget was 75,000 euro. But the project had to fit within the country strategy. So we read the country strategy, and a theme that seemed to fit was ecotourism. So we thought of a project, and we proposed some activities in the project, and that was to develop a parallel design studio in the first year of the project that would serve as a laboratory for further research on ecotourism. We also reserved budget to have 2 students from Ardi University, 2 Tanzanian students coming to Belgium. There was money to support staff travel back and forth, and we promised to end with a conference in year 2 in which we would share our work with stakeholders in tourism. And we won the project. We were very proud. This gave us an incentive to embark on this research. Okay, a little bit about ecotourism now. Tourism is a major income earner in Africa. It is believed to be a sector that can help fighting poverty. The newspaper says here, it outshines gold even as a top earner in the economy. And of course, Tanzania is known for its nature reserves. We've all heard about the Serengeti. They have the Big Five. Zanzibar is very known, of course. Little bit less known are the beautiful beaches along the mainland coastline, along the Indian Ocean. And then there's Dar es Salaam, the city that is not a destination for city trips yet. Dar es Salaam is really a business capital of Tanzania. It is a very busy African city with beautiful beaches though. But these beautiful beaches, they suffer because foreign investors come there to build huge resorts. They come there, they privatize pieces of land, pieces of beach here. Oh, sorry, the pointer is not working. So they privatize the beach, they build these huge resorts where tourists come. Tourists do not interfere with the local people. They import products. They even import employees because of the language barrier with the local people. So there is not really a return for the local community here in this kind of development. And this beach encroachments is even worse. They also take very important they take away opportunities for the local community to sustain their livelihood. For instance, here, this wall of the resort is blocking the way for the fishermen who live there in this village. They cannot access the beach anymore where they have to go to fish. There is a law in Tanzania that you have to build or that you cannot put up constructions within 60 meters from the shoreline, but this law is not respected, and you see an uncontrolled growth along the coastline. And together with our partner in Tanzania, we thought, well, maybe we can propose a different kind of waterfront development. Maybe there is another kind of tourism that is more sustainable. And we asked, or we tried to follow the principles of ecotourism in our design studio. That is to come up with projects that minimize impact, that build environmental and cultural awarenesses in tourists, in local people, that provide positive experience for all, and that provide financial benefits also for an empowerment for local people. Okay, this is the philosophy in which we asked our students to design projects, to come up with project ideas. Okay, now I'm going to explain you the process of the design studio. So we went to Tanzania to sign the project contracts, and then we visited some sites. We selected a site for this design studio here in the north of Dar es Salaam, Kunduchi Beach. There are other amazing sites as well, but for the first year we decided to have that as a case study. Kunduchi Beach is a place where all the problems and all the opportunities of tourism in Dar es Salaam come together. There is a huge resort, a water park. There is a peninsula here where you have a mangroves forest. There is a fisherman's village with very traditional way of fishing and building boats. There is a swamp area with beautiful baobab trees. There is a university site with research centers, and there are ancient relics of old mosques and old heritage. This was an optional design studio in the second master year of our curriculum. Students could choose to do their graduation project in Tanzania, and it was a course of 1 year. 5 minutes? Okay, I'll speed up. 16 of our students chose to do this project in Tanzania, and we also had 2 Tanzanian students in our graduation year. We started the project with a workshop, a common workshop in Dar es Salaam. In Dar es Salaam, 50 students took part in the parallel design studio. And this common workshop, there were lectures to introduce the principles of ecotourism, lectures on sustainability. They enjoyed meeting each other, and they did some field work together to learn to know the site, to interact with the local community, to learn more about local traditions and local culture. And then they had a workshop in which they formulated initial ideas. And these are the 2 actual design studio teachers, Peggy Winkels and Shubira Kalugila. And then our students came back home, and there was a white sheet of paper. They had to start formulating design ideas, but they were so overwhelmed with this experience of being in a different context that at first they didn't know where to start. So it took them a long time to come up with ideas, but slowly they started to see the opportunities of the context and to try to formulate projects within that context. So this is the process in text, so they had to read the context, analyze challenges, find opportunities, draft a project, design it into a personal project, and elaborate this project to presentation. So this is an intermediate jury, and then there was a final jury in which we invited also colleagues from Dar es Salaam, of course, to judge our projects. And then we ended up with a number of future visions for the waterfront of Dar es Salaam, Kunduchi Beach. We presented this in an exhibition, also in our yearbook. There are a few yearbooks here for people who are interested. You can take them. And then our staff went to Dar es Salaam, to Art University, to see what the Tanzanian students did and what their projects were. And we saw what they did, and we discussed this together with the staff, because of course we see differences in approaches, differences in design, in style, in culture, and it's very interesting to talk about this. Now, I want to show you 3. I want to go into detail in 3 projects if I have the time. Okay, very fast. First project is of Laurent Gillissen. He designed a fisherman's farm. He was inspired by the needs of this local fisherman's village, and also he acknowledged the threat, because they are planning to build another resort here on this beautiful peninsula. And he said, okay, I'm going to propose an alternative. You see some images of the fisherman's village. And what he did was he designed a fish farm in this area. You had already the wave breakers there, and he used this as places where, well, fish and seaweed could be farmed and could generate an income for this community. And he did a really thorough research about how fish farms work. He even calculated the revenues for the local fishermen and how many fishermen would be employed in this area. And the actual buildings that he did were very modest, few pavilions here and there that is needed to support the work there, but also a visitors pavilion that would attract tourists and show them how this works and raise awareness. Okay, here you can see how this building is constructed in local materials, wood. Another project was of Noel Gustavi. Noel was the Tanzanian student who was in our school. And he decided to address the issue of transportation in Dar es Salaam. Traffic jams are huge there. Well, and he was inspired by transportation on the water. Venice, of course, but also there is the traditional dhows in Tanzania. And he designed a transportation hub close to Konduchi Beach that would open up the old relics and the ancient heritage sites that were there, and at the same time would be a good way of transporting or mode of transportation from Dar es Salaam. This is the pier, some technical information, beautiful images of how he would envision the inside. Okay, and then last one, Marie Frioni. She designed a laboratory for the sea life. She was moved by the amount of trash on the beaches. And she decided, in line with the research buildings that were already there, to make or to develop an awareness center and a research center for sea life. She was inspired by ancient settlements, the traditional wood carving and wood construction, and also she used principles of biomimicry for the ventilation of the building. Okay, sorry. This is a final image. Marie entered the competition, the Regional Architecture Prize. She won the 3rd prize, and she also got the opportunity, I don't know if you recognize this woman, but this is the Queen of Belgium, Queen Mathilde. She visited our faculty 2 years ago, and Marie could present the work to her. And then, in the end, there was the conference. So we presented the work of our students and of Tanzanian students at the conference in Dar es Salaam. There was a press conference, keynote speakers, work sessions, as a conference should be, and poster presentations of the work of students. So that was the end of our project. Can I go on for 1 minute? Because I want to show that this is not the end. we were so enthusiastic of this project, and we applied for after 1 year already. We knew that we wanted to keep on cooperating with University of Dar es Salaam. So we tried to ask for funding. I'm always looking for money for this kind of cooperation, so watch your pockets. There's Vleroes. We applied again. Fortunately, we failed. UHASLT supported our cooperation, and now we also have Erasmus Plus funding for this international cooperation. And we had a 2nd edition of the Studio Tanzania. We had works on site Kigamboni, on Msasani. We're planning to have another studio, Bagamoyo, next year. We are expanding our network in Tanzania. We do not only send students there for this international studio, but also for internships. Our students, together with students from Art University, take part in design build projects in Tanzania. And 2 PhD researchers have already started their PhD, one on ecotourism, and the other one now is starting on sustainability. And that's not the end yet. The Tanzanian baby was my first baby. This year I had a 2nd baby, and we started a parallel design studio in Vietnam on flooding, and also this partnership is going really well. So the only real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscape, but in having new eyes and giving people new eyes. Asante sana, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, but yes, for the enthusiasm, that's fantastic. So it's something that helps us in understanding that things are possible. So coming to the second one, Thomas Hilbert. And Thomas Hilbert, very few words, but your bio is special. Is a Swiss architect, and now he associate professor for habitation at Aarhus School of Architecture. Has been teaching in Denmark, Sweden, and India, and lecturing in many other countries. But studied architecture at ETH, and in Zurich, at Hochschule für angewandte Kunst in Vienna, and at CAPT University in Ahmedabad, India. And also, this is the last one, psychology at Horus University. So this is interesting because it holds a PhD in architecture from the Aarhus School in the field of security, war, and terrorism. So that's a very, very special CV. Compliments, please.
Thank you, Leonardo.
We want to understand what's...
Without a microphone, so I try to speak a little bit loud.
Prefer?
So yeah, I prefer it loud. A bit more freely.
But I don't know how
To turn it off. So in my teaching career, I have quite a lot of opportunities to work in myself. Semester and so, wow. Which we did in Tamil Nadu together with an Indian school. But I'm not going to present you all those projects, so don't worry. So basically, I'm going to present one project which we did south of Mumbai. The title of this more report from the trenches is Architecture off the Beaten Track. And the whole thing started actually in 2010. Maybe just quickly before I start with this, Martin this morning said 80% of all the architecture or of all the building activities take place in emerging countries. I really don't like the word emerging countries because, I mean, those countries have been there for all time. We didn't just look good enough, and emerging also refers more to economy, and I think we should get away from this economic thinking and maybe treasure other value sets more than just this economic perspective. So, and probably it's better to talk again about developing countries because they can develop in a better manner than we are acting at the moment. So that's just a small side remark. But Danish companies have a big workload in those places, actually, and some up to 80% as well, as Martin also said. But the question is, are we really ready to work in those places? So what makes us actually, because they know how to build houses and how to produce architecture. They might just have different value sets, and I think it's much more interesting to learn from each other. And when we go there to those places, it's mainly to learn something, to do something for our students, because that's our main task, to educate our students to become better architects. So are we ready? I can't use this thing, so I have to jump around a little bit. In 2010, Sejima was curating the Venice Biennale, and it was the first time that as a woman curated the Biennale. She won also the Pritzker Prize in 2010, and her motto was "People meet in architecture." And what we met in architecture at the Biennale was the office of Bijoy Jain of Studio Mumbai. And we were really fascinated about his meticulous approach to architecture and the way he uniquely produced his stuff with a lot of detailing in one-to-one. And when he was teaching in Copenhagen in 2012 or 13, we approached him and suggested a collaboration for us. Those who don't know Studio Mumbai, this is Bijoy Jain here on the picture on the left. This is one of his famous buildings, which unfortunately doesn't come very well in this light, the Palmyra House on the coast, west coast of India. And this is his office, which is a fantastic, unique place under coconut palm trees on the Indian west coast, with a lot of models and work going on one-to-one. He employs a lot, or employed at that time, a lot of local artisans, of craftsmen who worked on site and produced everything one-to-one, from door handles over mattresses to the building themselves. So everything was tested up to the scale one-to-one. And when we saw this at the Biennale, I think we had to go there. So we had to get a bite of that and learn from this unique environment. And luckily, Bijoy agreed to having us a few semesters and as his host. Here, another picture from the environment. Unfortunately, the light is really bad and you can't see it. But it was a unique place with a lot of activity going on. And I think it was for us also a motivation to get our students out of this kind of comfort zone in the Scandinavian environment where where people believe they know everything, how everything is working and so on, and challenge them with a setting that was maybe not as they really thought the world functions around them. So traveling abroad, of course, with students always confronts you with the worst and the best of a country. Familiar concepts like eating without cutlery or what the heck am I eating here? So become a challenge. And I think this challenge and this questioning of things, how things happen. So, for example, how do you use a toilet without paper, or which toilet should I use when there is one? This is from our hotel in India, some places. So I think just making those kind of reflections and thinking about those basic concepts of everyday life again is really also profiting or benefiting their own architectural production. So I think that's one of our main motivations. But before we venture out to those exotic places, I think here's another picture. This is maybe the only indoor spaces in Studio Mumbai are the bookshelves, because they have to be protected from the moist and the dust, and the printer room. Everything else is happens in more or less open spaces. And you can hear the monkeys running over the corrugated roofs. This was our working space here in India when we settled down around a big table so that the information flow happens very quickly. But when we went, we had no idea what project we should do. So that's probably the first time we started the semester without a concrete idea of what kind of project we should perform. So here just a few other pictures from the studio. The craftsmen, they were just sitting beside the table, so you could watch them doing the details you were drawing on the table directly. They were produced just beside them. Or here the women in the beautiful saris producing bricks for model building in scale 1 to 10, so which were burned like real bricks. So all the process of production could also be observed of our students directly on site. Or here they did the kind of lime coating for IPS, they called it Indian pattern stones. The students, of course, had to try themselves and also test their abilities and getting also the respect for the workers and artisans who were working on those kind of things. Here, new materials, asphalt models. So Bijoy was experimenting with asphalt, which was burned on spot and which stank and kind of pestered the whole area for a few days. But it gave a new dimension and a new soap models. So they smelled nice. So in contrary, So they tried out small soap models. Or here, can you see anything at all? So okay. So here bricks in 1 to 50. So the whole buildings were produced in 1 to 50 scale, like in the real material. No laser cutter there. So everything handmade, of course. or bronze casting here of nearby things. All kind of things our students got access to. So it was really learning from, maybe even more than with. So the studio was a treasure trove for architect students. What's happening now? No, it got stuck. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's a completely meltdown here. Nothing is going on. I'm sorry.
You don't have the presentation on the key?
Yes.
You put it on the other computer?
But the program the presentation runs in is a Mac program. So
Did you make a PDF? But
let's give it one chance. And then so so I guess all the Mac users got a new, the PC users got a new argument here.
yeah, I'm surprised.
So, I'm very sorry about this.
No worries.
So, yeah.
If you want to use this one? No?
I think it's not. Nothing is happening. Could. It really doesn't make sense without pictures.
Ah, yeah.
So,
Is it too big a file? Why would you?
no,
Why would a Mac try?
yeah, I don't know. I really don't know.
No. You're using a Mac.
Yes. Okay, something is happening. Yes.
The heat, the asphalt.
The asphalt was. I mean, this happens quite a lot in the jungle as well. I can tell you. So, the computers got too heated. Yeah. Okay, back on track. Off the beaten track. Yeah. So the students started working. Of course, I haven't told you what we were working on, but when we started working, it was also wrong because we started with a paper model, and Bijoy didn't like that at all. This ugly material, gray cardboard was not allowed in the studio, and they had to argue with him, of course, and to redo it again in not so sustainable teak tree instead of, and that resulted, of course, in many night hours. And but the place is fantastic at night, and I think they seldom went home before 1 o'clock in the morning, starting. So, but before we venture out and travel abroad, we always do a kind of thorough compendium or travel guide, and I can pass it around. You can look at it if you want to, and where we also learn about etiquette and how to behave in foreign countries. And then we venture out for a few days, a study trip, to get an introduction to the country and the culture, where we look at more famous and less famous architectural marvels of the country. And also before, Walter mentioned that before we travel abroad, we have a thorough anthropology seminar where we work together with anthropologists and get some basic tools in our backpack, like interview techniques or go-along methods and so on, which we then later on try on site. But we didn't know what to do. The only thing we decided on beforehand, let's work with water. Water is a big issue in India and in many, and we found this kind of air photo in Google Maps, of course, of the area where Bijoy's office was, and we saw this water pond there in the middle of the map, and this might be something to work with, so of course. So we went there and looked at the place, and it was right in the heart of the village. There was a water pond around the temple, and beside this was a square. So it looks very idyllic. As you can see, this is a Shiva temple, and a shrine beside it. And then there was this fantastic water pond from Mughal times area, which was used to all kind of activities. So the people were doing their dishes in it, while others were bathing or used it for sanitation. There was ritual cleansing for people before they went into the temple. They went into the water pond, and others did their washing activities in the same water. Of course, the kids used it for swimming and playing around this place. And beside this water pond was this kind of fantastic tree, which provided shade, but also a less fantastic spot, which was a kind of odd-shaped square with a lot of rubbish, and in the center of the square was a public toilet, which smelled disgustingly. But once a week, this place transformed completely. So merchants from all the areas came and gathered under the shade of the tree on the plinth, or also around the spot. Let's see if this works. And it became the most fantastic marketplace. So of course we had to do something there. So we got our project and started working with it. The fisher wife, he came in their beautiful saris, but there was no infrastructure for it, nothing at all. So this thing revolved around this ugly smelling toilet. The few fishmongers who had to sell their products directly from the dirty floor, they tried to lift it a little bit with their own means and try to get some shade with some makeshift tarpaulins that were set up and bathed the whole thing in a red color. So it changed very drastically. But we decided, let's do something with that. And when you start a new endeavor in a foreign place, you have always to inform the authorities. And you can see the guy with a lot of gold and watches, and so he was the local mayor, and we informed him that we intend to do something with this space, and we would also like to present it to the community later on. And he liked that a lot, because then he could sell it to the community as his own initiative, which is always good for constituents, of course. So we started working on it. In a very traditional way. We did all the traditional stuff architects do, kind of photo registrations of the buildings, typology studies in Studio Mumbai red ink, of course. So measurements for the temples and all the houses around the place, late working hours again. And we produced the sections and plans, and then the beautiful teak model the CJ asked for, BJ asked for, and we did mappings, of course, traffic studies, and I mean everything what we do before we start to get a thorough site inventory and site analysis, kind of year circle investigations. How is the space used during the year, during the day? When the vendors come, where do they place themselves, and so on. Pattern studies, detailed studies, color studies, even the vendor signs of the area were kind of collected, the flora and fauna of the place. And I think what was very helpful was the object throughway. So we did a lot of object survey around the spot, and here the more darker secrets revealed themselves slowly. You see the alcohol bottle and the playing cards, something that is a no-go in India usually, definitely not in public, but all those things happened there as well. So we got a little bit deeper undercover here. We found some mysterious signs around trees. That's something that women do around holy trees to kind of influence their fertility. And we found secret bars behind tarpaulins that were covered. So we got more and more into the place. But then, of course, we also started using our anthropological tools and started talking with people. We tried to involve different participation in design methods, or participation through design rather. And to do that, you always start with kids. I mean, they are fantastic. So you easily catch their curiosity. And we organized different setups, also from the anthropology seminars. We learned how to do this kind of stuff. And the kids are very often better in English than their parents are, so they also functioned as translators later on. You can imagine, they come up with great ideas what to do with this area. They wanted a boat like the neighboring village had as well on the pond to roam around, to do fishing, a cycle path around the pond where they could cycle around it, and stuff like that, which our students could bring with them for the work. And when you talk to the kids, the parents get interested, of course. Here the ladies in front of the temple got curious, and we started talking with them, and they invited us to their homes, and sometimes we had to pinpoint with sign language to communicate, but often the kids help translating. You meet a nice couple in the shop around the corner, they sell stuff cheaper to you, and the lady from the restaurant gives you cheaper snacks, and the grandfather explains you about his belief and the family life in the area. But of course, we also talk to the more frequent users of the site, like the merchants or the truck driver who stopped for a bath, or the school girls on her way home from school, and so on. And all this information of then was gathered again in a kind of and distributed among everybody. And everybody was supposed to make a proposal for the site, draw it out, and that was then again presented to the community. I'm finished in 2 minutes, I guess. That put a lot of pressure on the officials, of course, because suddenly there were projects, unsolicited projects nobody had expected before. And the first question is, okay, which is the best project? And when will it be implemented? It was never really the idea. I mean, of course, we would love to implement it there, but it was not in the schedule or in the curriculum that we also would implement it. But we passed it on as an idea. And of course, you have to present it in an understandable way with a lot of renderings or beautiful drawings that can be easily understood by lay people. But it was very low-key approaches the students came up with. A better plinth to sell stuff on, a better pavement, better ventilated toilets, separated from each other physically for men and women, so that the women didn't feel so embarrassed to go there on a public spot. The women's toilet was another place. The toilet could also function as during market days, a better water fountain for the families to pick up water, kind of sun shading with local materials, of course. An important aspect was lighting during night hours, so that people didn't fall accidentally into the pond, especially the kids. And then we also came up with some technical solutions for water purification and water harvesting, of course. That had been so there are a lot of. I don't present you every solution we came up with, but just a small, quick variety. Better washing situation for the women that was separated from the water tank, so that it didn't spoil the water in the tank, and better situation for the banyans or the merchants along the road, and a better access to the pond as well for people who wanted to water their cattle or just to swim in it. So here, one of the last slides. Then coming home, it's always important to tell people what you have been doing, as I'm doing right now. So we made also a publication the few weeks home later on. And of course, we also had to do an exhibition in our school's exhibition space. We had to ship the model home. That was the biggest task, to collect it again together. And yeah, that's more or less the last picture. And I think escaping the comfort zone and the familiar alma mater for a few weeks is really rewarding. I mean, it's a big adventure, but it's also a big reward. And I think the mutual learning and the mutual understanding for different forms of perspectives, or Weltanschauung, if you want, becomes more and more important in a world where Western, not only architects, but architects more and more build everywhere and believe to be world citizens with a universal understanding. So first of all, I think working abroad teaches you one lesson, a lesson in humility. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Thomas. Again, another injection of enthusiasm. And then we will speak at the end of this. And then now, Leonardo, please. Leonardo Madrazzo, who is professor at La Salle School of Architecture in Barcelona and director of the research group. He's also worked in ETH in Zurich, but before he studied in Harvard University and University of California. What is interesting is that your thesis at PhD was the concept of type in architecture and an inquiry into the nature of architectural form, a very Italian-Swiss argument. And so very interesting also to understand your point of view, related also, I mean, for the teaching, your representation, design, and theory. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, and first of all, thank you, Ken, for this invitation to present here the work of the Oikonet project. Oikonet is an Erasmus project I have been coordinating for the last 3.5 years, and what I'm going to present here is basically one part of this large project, which is covering different areas. I'm going to focus only on one part that has to do with collaboration with other countries, and mainly focusing on participation. But the project itself is much more comprehensive than what I'm going to present here. Basically, this is the structure of the presentation. I'm going to give some background about the project, and then I'm going to discuss the meaning of participation now in global dwelling, in our global culture, then some case studies done during the project, and some reflections at the end. So, talking about funding. So funding is very important. So we started to ask for funding in 2003 for this series of projects. We have started to do one after the other. We started in 2003 with this Erasmus intensive project. We were in that time 5 partners. Then we continued with another program called Oikolomos. We did it in 2 stages. We were already in that time 12 partners. And after this, continuing with this idea of researching about contemporary housing in our culture. That's one of the main topics on this line of research. But in parallel to that is also the issue of pedagogic innovation. So all the partners involved, we were in a way trying to create innovative learning spaces to collaborate and to reflect about these 2 main issues. The subject matter of contemporary housing, and also how to innovate our pedagogy around this topic in a collaborative manner. So this is what we have been doing for almost 13 years. And the last step in this collaboration has been the Oikonet project, where we went from 7 partners to 34 partners. So this has been a very big challenge, a very challenging project to carry out, but also, I think, rewarding in terms of results, I believe. So Oikonet is an Erasmus network project. That means that academic networks, the goal of this program is to promote European cooperation and innovation within a given academic discipline, fostering innovation, exchange of methodologies and good practices. This is indeed what we have done in between the 34 partners that have been collaborated in this project. So the 34 partners are basically these kind of organizations. There are 19 universities, schools of architecture and urban planning. There are 10 research institutes, mainly in housing research. There are 2 social organizations, 1 professional organization, 1 local administration, and 1 international agency, which is the United Nations Habitat. We have been the coordinators of the project. So Oikonet is a network in different senses. It's a network of institutions, as we have seen, from different profiles. It's also a network of themes of study that all the partners have, in a way, put on the table in order to collaborate. It's a network of learning activities, of spaces we have created of collaboration, which is not necessarily traditional courses or traditional academic programs, but new ways of collaborating that we have tried to explore and implement. It's a network of learners. Learners are both teachers and students, and also the citizens, the residents who collaborated in some of the activities. So this is the diagram we presented to win the bid 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's still valid after the project ended. Basically, what we wanted to do was to integrate in a new kind of pedagogic framework these 3 areas: housing research, community participation, and pedagogical activities. So our purpose was to interlink the 3 of them. That means that to create new learning spaces, I prefer to use the name learning spaces rather than courses or subjects, because in a way give us more opportunity to explore new ways of collaboration, new methodologies. That's what we did with these learning spaces, in order to integrate issues that were brought by our colleagues in housing research with issues that were relevant at the level of local communities with pedagogical activities. And at the bottom, there is the digital platform, in a way to support this kind of blended learning model, which we developed for the project, which facilitated the collaboration and the sharing of contents and methodologies. So basically, this is the diagram that explains the network activity. The results after 3.5 years of work has been 12 of these learning spaces collaboratively designed and implemented by the different schools, 4 community outreach projects, local community actions, 3 international workshops, 3 international conferences on the theme of global dwelling, 20 exhibitions in the different schools, over 50 videos that are all available in the YouTube channel about lectures, activities, 18 meetings and seminars, 24 reports which are available in the website, 2 books and several articles and publications. So these are tangible results of the huge activity developed by these 34 partners over 3 years of time. A book is right now in press, which is summarizing all of this work. The book is called Global Dwelling, Intertwining Research, Community Participation and Pedagogy. It will be printed by the end of September. It's already available online. This book is just structured in 3 parts. In a way, they reflect the construction of the network. The first part is called Mappings. Mappings is just to identify issues which are relevant for contemporary housing at a global level. Interactions are collaborations between people from different schools, different subject areas, different domains, which have reflected around issues of contemporary dwelling. And finally, confluences refer to particular exercises, particular implementations of these learning spaces carried out in collaboration. One of the topics that is running across the book is, of course, community participation. There's for example, this is the entry written by our colleagues in the United Nations Habitat about community participation you can find in the book. Well, now this has been the background of the project and the results. I mean, there's much more, particularly with regard to pedagogical activities, but if you are interested, you can find a lot of information, the reports, in the website. I will focus now on the issue that I was invited to talk here now, which is about participation in this context of global dwelling. I made these reflections about it before showing some of the work we did within the project. I think many of us agree that we are experiencing a crisis of representation at many different levels, not only in politics and economics, also in this development of the cities, also in the discipline of architecture. We experience the lack of vision, or we are just longing for the lack of visions that we had perhaps in the past. We have the experience of living in a world à la dérive, that we are just moving, reacting with short impulses. And this can apply to politics, but also applies to the city development, I would say. We are lacking these heroic visions of the modernity, where we had an imagination of how the world would be, and the commitment to do it. We are in a different kind of world. This is the global society, the global world we are living now. I don't know if you agree with that perception. Citizen participation is back to fashion. It's nothing new, but now it's in the world, in everybody's mouth. But it was already there in a way since the 60s at least, and also in architecture and planning, not to forget. It's a global phenomenon, as we have seen with so many examples we have seen today about collaboration between schools from different continents and different activities. Participation is an opportunity to get across cultural barriers, continents, disciplines. So it's enough to see to seek for the word participation in the urban agenda from the last meeting in Quito, to see how important politically, ideologically has become this term. Participation is a word that is everywhere in this document. I only selected two parts. One has to do with the participation in the development of public spaces. Public spaces, they say here in the agenda, are participatory, promote civic engagement, engender a sense of belonging and ownership among all the inhabitants. But also this applies to housing. They refer to housing as the right to adequate housing, the right to an adequate standard of living, enabling the participation and engagement of communities, again, participation in all different levels, from the urban scale to the domestic scale. This quest for participation and to the right to the city is, of course, not new. It's 50 years old, at least. Enough to refer once again to Lefebvre, the right to the city, le droit à la ville. This idea that inhabitants have the right to say something about the development of the city already was claimed by Lefebvre. Also, this important text about participation from Einstein, reminding that citizen participation is just a way of sharing power, which is in a way also what is, I think, something not to forget. We are sometimes just treating participation as something that is very rewarding for us, like we feel better, we learn, everybody is happy about that. But sometimes we have to think that the real issue behind is the real change, not the superficial change. It's not about feeling good ourselves, it's about are we or not able to make real changes, institutional changes, changes in the power structures. So participation has two different views, and there's still a debate, an ongoing debate about what is good and what is bad about participation. You can find arguments for and against. In these two books, there were in a way this kind of debate, one against the other. In the positive way, we can say the community participation favors the use of local construction techniques, the cultural traditions can be preserved, group discrimination can be overcome, also contributes to create a sense of belonging, to improve the social capital, local economical development. These are positive aspects of collaboration and participation, but also there are negative aspects. One of them is that through participation, you avoid conflict, and therefore you avoid to change the real power structures. This is a negative part. The other negative part is that we think sometimes that communities are homogeneous structures, and we neglect the fact that people, individuals, have different interests also inside the communities. So these are views, opposing views about the issue of participation. With regard to participation in architecture, and going back to 50 years ago, the critique of the modern movement exemplified by the Team 10 and all the architects around, among them Giancarlo Di Carlo, but also the Smithsons and so on, they already, in a way, criticized the modern movement for having ignored the user, having ignored the real needs of people and concentrated only on transcendental ideas. So Di Carlo, in this famous article, which has been republished, just reclaimed the need to acknowledge the right of people to express themselves. And that involved to question for architects all the traditional value systems of modernity, of modern architecture, modern movement architecture. I have tried to go with this argument now, with these diagrams I have prepared. The vision of modernity is just exemplified by this statement by Le Corbusier, very famous statement. We have a new vision and a new social life, but we have not adapted the house accordingly. This was written, published in 1923. It expresses the ideology of the modern movement. It expresses also the divide between modern society and modern architecture. There are two different worlds. The world of the modern architect is just to bring them together. The modern architect places himself here as the one that is able to make the nexus between one and the other. But the starting point is that society is one thing. The society that is characterized by rationality, industrialization, efficiency. And on the other hand, we have still waiting the modern house, which is not corresponding to the modern society. That was the problem, how the problem of the modern house was presented in that time, and how the architect, the modern architect, saw his role in that situation, like the bridge between both, like the one who is able to conceptualize modern culture in order to extract from here the principles that have to be transformed into an architectural artifact, into a modern house. Perhaps we understand better how we are in our situation in the global societies if we take this as a reference to see where we are now in relation to this situation in the modernity. Where are we now? Perhaps architecture is not divided by modern culture or global culture. Perhaps the place of architecture is here, inside. Perhaps the operation of architects has to be not in a separate realm, as in the modernity, but it has to operate within the real world, within the actual societies. I think we have seen many of these positions here in many of the presentations we have seen today, this morning, and also this afternoon. I think many of us agree that now our place is here, inside, not outside. Nobody is asking us now to make a statement like Le Corbusier to say what is the problem of modern house. It's something we have to find out collaboratively. It's something that we are not expected to provide a statement as intellectuals to conceptualize what is global society and to tell the global societies what they should do with regard to housing. We are not in that situation. So go to in our conference about global dwelling, we were reflecting about what is the meaning of this term, how we, where we find global dwelling in our societies. And we came up to these three concepts, to these three drivers. Global dwelling means, in a way, on the one hand, to recognize the existence of driving forces that are present in gentrification, mobility, sustainability. Also, it's the will to identify housing needs in collaboration with the different stakeholders. And also it means the recognition to enhance our field of action, to include other fields, to include other players in the definition of the problem. We have done that in our project with different actions, different community projects you can find here in the Econet blogs. And in particular, there are three cases which I'm going to go quickly through here that you can find in the book, you can find also on the website. These are the projects in Puerto Rico and Chile by two of our colleagues, Omaira Rivera and Viviana Fernandez, in Puerto Rico and Chile. The project Living Dwelling in Skopje by our colleagues Michalo Zinowski and Ogne Marina, and our project in Barcelona that we did in a project about co-housing. So in the book you can find these projects reflected. In the case of Puerto Rico, there are a course called Collaborative Design Studio and Evolutionary Habitat, where they are doing projects with collaboration with residents in order to work with them, to identify the problems they have, to develop collaborative activities with them, and to propose solutions, working in the social milieu, working with the people directly. And the important thing here, perhaps, is that it's integrated into a regular course. So it's not an ad hoc activity, it's just a regular course that is taking place in the University of Puerto Rico. These are other kind of cases that are described in the book, different activities. In the case of Chile, it's something similar. They also have a course called Multi-Scale Participatory Processes. In this case, they work on different spaces, different scales, also with people directly, also to advise people. And they describe one of the projects where they follow this kind of methodology, first participatory assessment, then making proposals, and then identifying the designs and discussing designs, always working with people and interacting with people. The other case in Skopje had a more challenging purpose. It was also a research project. There were different schools involved, not only the one in Skopje, but also Tirana and Belgrade were involved. There was also the interest from the side of the local administration to know how they should change the planning to face and to give response to the ideas of people, to the way they feel spaces. And they followed a methodology based on this Halpin and Burns methodology from the 70s, which is based on these 4 stages: resources, scoring, evaluation, and performance, which is explained in the book. I think these two diagrams are very important and I think very interesting, very inspiring from the work of our colleagues in Skopje. In a way, they reflect a site analysis showing the relation between private and public space, but also these sociograms, so-called sociograms, represent the interaction between people. So I think this is very important because it's not only about our tools as designers just to represent and do a site analysis of the spaces and the buildings, but also to understand how people interact and how to represent that interaction. That's also, I think, a very interesting tool that our colleagues from Skopje are applying. And finally, the third case is our case in La Salle, in the School of Architecture. We collaborated with a cooperative, a housing cooperative, in order to transform an existing building in the historical center of Barcelona. So we work with the future dwellers. We identify with them what were their needs, what were their visions, what they wanted to do with the buildings. All of this was done in a participatory process where the students design the communication process, design the process to interact with the dwellers, and then to extract the knowledge from them in order to apply it to the design proposals. So this is explained in a video, which you can find in the web. And basically what we asked the dwellers was to imagine their ideal living space based on photographs, to describe how they live in their actual apartments with these kind of diagrams, identifying not the rooms, but the activities, and also to plan the future home, also with a kind of mechanism. All these representation mechanisms are non-standard, non-professional representation tools in order to facilitate the dialogue with the dwellers. So all of that was done in 2 sessions with the dwellers. And then at the end, we asked the students to bring all this knowledge into a template, which we gave to the students, where basically what we asked them was in the upper part, just to write down what are the inputs they got from students, what kind of vision about their future dwelling they have, expressed with the words of the dwellers. That was the first row. The second one, we asked students to assign these intentions, these wills, these desires to some topics they have categorized from the discussions with the dwellers, family, comfort, so on. And then we asked them to represent graphically, but without using professional conventional drawings, an idea, a vision of how to live in that apartment. For example, the idea of an open kitchen where different families could live together. That came from the inputs from the different dwellers. So using the same template, another group of students developed the idea of a greenhousing and all these typical activities that you can do on the roof and so on. So the collaboration between the courses was shared during the semesters. So we received video lectures by Omaira from Puerto Rico. We gave a lecture to our colleagues in Skopje through video conferencing. So we were just sharing and exchanging collaborations. And then at the end of the project, we developed a reader about common credits, a kind of learning outcomes and competence for a curriculum on global dwelling, which you can find also on the web, where we just describe what kind of skills are needed for students to learn in this context of collaboration, this context of global dwelling learning that I described at the beginning. So some conclusions, some reflections. So conclusions that can be applied to these cases I have been showing. Basically is that there's no established methodology. Every participatory process is a different case. It has to be designed ad hoc. Even in every location, to repeat a participatory process means to rethinking again. Participatory process means time to dwell with the community. Actually, it's an act of dwelling with the people, to prepare and to intervene and to work with them. All participants in a participatory design process are learners, so we are not going there to teach, as this has been said by many of you before. We agree. We are not going there to give lessons. We are just to exchange experiences about what means to dwell in a place, to live in a city, to dwell in a neighborhood. So students in this activity acquire new skills, which we believe that will be important for the future professional activity. Skills as designers of communication processes, skills as mediators, communicators. They learn also tools like interviewing and approaching people, learning from the people. All of that is a process that we are not used to that, and they are learning these skills. Integrating community participation in the architecture curriculum is an opportunity to create new learning spaces. That's what we believe. I think we can rethink the design studio in the light of this global dwelling approach, to bring other subject matters, to bring other stakeholders into the discussion. the outputs of that experiences have to be profited by the local administrations, by the schools, and there's something, kind of a gap there that has to be solved. How these inputs become transformed into urban regulations, how this affects the urban planning, all of these inputs received by community participation. And some reflections at the end, some open questions. Participation is mainly applied to the small scale, to small local projects. But what about the big issues? Does participation always come late? And this has to do also with the changes of the power structures. I mean, can we really take decisions collaboratively when we are talking about complex issues like transportation, economical strategies that affect the territory? It's complex issues that sometimes even the experts are not able to cope with. Can we deal with participation in that scale? Do architects have the right tools to approach people? I mean, we use questionnaires, as probably community psychologists use, but they use it for other purposes. We are not community psychologists. We want to know other kind of things. We have to question ourselves if we have the right tools to really approach people from the interest of architecture. And all of this knowledge that we acquire, how do we bring them into design? Because in design methodology, we normally refer to the creative leap, the gap that is between analysis and design. And I think it's still an underlying issue. I mean, we receive a lot of inputs, a lot of inspiring ideas, but then it comes a moment to give form, to give materiality, and there seems to be still a big jump. There's not really a continuity between both processes. So there's something that's still there to be reflected upon. So that was the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Leandro. We are just, the time should be, no, it's quite finished because it's 3:45. But anyway, we have just 10 minutes to debate, to questions, and to remarks. And I'm saying that...
Could you maybe put 3 chairs on the stage so that they can sit up there?
Yes, it's possible. These two, maybe. Okay, thank you. That's better, so they can answer together. Just to, yes, there are questions about these 3 real interesting interventions. There are stories, experiences, very enthusiastic. So it may be that you need 1 hour each one, and also for the final one, which is very important. So
Don't be shy. I have a microphone here.
Maria.
Hi, thank you so much. That was really interesting, different takes on participation. I just want to ask, I guess, all 3 of you, because all 3 of you, all of 3 of your manifestations ended at a very different place. And I wonder, in future, how important is it that it does manifest, that we give back something real tangible back to the community, and how important is that for curriculum to come to a circular close in a way, so for future?
Wants to.
Ladies first, that's polite. I think it's very important to show results, to disseminate your work, because it's a way of testing what you did. If you only show it to your peers, you will not get the feedback that you need to see if what you try to do is really working. So that's why you have to show your work. And that's the only way, I think, in which a curriculum can evolve in a good way. If you keep preaching for your own church, you will not evolve in the right direction, I think. You have to be brave enough to show it to others, to the local community, to people. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I can just repeat what else said. But of course, I think it's also it gives an extra booster for the students. So when they know what they're doing is appreciated and gets a response, they are much more eager to really come up with a good result, and they give their best. and it helps to make them more mature as well. As all the participatory processes, when you are confronted with real people behind the abstract problems we often work with, it's such a huge difference, I think. Then.
Well, yes, I think basically the same. I mean, our main concern is how to avoid to remain at the level of interesting experiences. I mean, how to change really the architectural curriculum. That's another power struggle. And how to really make an impact in the reality we are immersed when we do these kind of experiences. I think it's kind of mixed feelings when we dedicate time and with the people and to try to find solutions and identify the problems also. And then just suddenly everything stops and everybody goes. And that creates a kind of mixed feelings. On the one hand, you feel that you have done something socially relevant, but on the other hand, you have sometimes the feeling that it's something cosmetic, that reality goes on as it is, both in academia and in the real world.
Another question, Maria? Somebody else? Then if somebody, that's okay, that's right, then you back.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to ask a little bit about the after, the point where you finished the projects, all three in a way, of what the communities felt, like how much you involved them, especially Thomas with yours. Did they agree with these interventions of this small scale? Were you talking with them and working with them? And then did you build anything, or what did the mayor do afterwards? But also how this this discussion can continue in the other two presentations, and how the ideas of these projects are then continued.
Okay, thank you, Alexandra. Yeah, of course they wanted something done. I mean, something that we discovered by a chance, like as an unsolicited project, actually was a real wish of the community. So they wanted to do something with the space. It was really in the heart of the village, and they had to improve the situation. So, but I mean, for us, it started with a smelly toilet, and ended up with some really low-key interventions, which were discussed through those participatory discussions we had with the community and the different agents of the community. Of course, what we are not very good to at architect schools very often is cost management. And a lot of solutions, even so we try to work with local materials, and so we're a little bit over-designed in terms of how much it would cost to do it. But we left the catalog of ideas at the community, with the community, and there were elections soon coming up. So they really wanted to implement stuff in the spirit of our ideas, because they were the ideas of the community themselves. The mayor didn't get elected again, so I don't know if I have to tell much more, but I think something has been done right now. I haven't had the chance to visit the place again.
Yes, for our parallel design studio, we're still working on sharing the results with the local community. One of the goals of our project was to build capacity within the university, within Arde University as well, and it was our intention to involve society and to strive for societal outreach. But this is not a common thing yet to do in Arde University, and they are warming for the idea now. So the idea is to make a booklet and to go out to the community with them. But the main speech of our main language is Swahili, so they will have to do it anyway. We cannot communicate with local community as they can. So yeah, it's still a goal. We're working on it. We're not there yet. And sometimes it's a struggle. It's true.
Well, in the project we did in Barcelona, after we finished, the cooperative continued with the project. So the ideas that in a way we helped to bring to the light, they will continue with the architect that took over the commission. So in a way they were able to carry out the process, but doesn't mean that the process was a continuation of the one we started. They started again from a different viewpoint, but probably the point that they started the design project was already different as the one would have been if our participatory process would not have taken place. So in a way, I think we had certain impact in this case.
Maria, do you have a question? But I have. Oh, sorry. Pasilla.
Thank you. Have you ever encountered a situation where there were conflicts in this participatory process, like participants asking for something which was against your principles, for example? I mean, asking for a big car parking instead of a park.
We are experiencing continuously, I mean, we have other projects going on that are concerned with participation and urban planning in our school. It is quite common in the discussions that there are differences between community members and even very private interests in the community, like some people having some kind of property rights in a building and they want to, in a way, in a kind of hidden way, to defend something that is for the community when indeed is something very personal. There are all kinds of things, all kinds of strategies, so we cannot be naive when we go to work with the community. I think we are sometimes idealizing too much the issue of participation. It has its own difficulties, sometimes makes sense, sometimes doesn't make sense. It's a very delicate issue.
Yes, we have also encountered different ideas about architecture and what good architecture is. We could see that in the differences in results of the design studios from the students in Dar es Salaam and from our students. Our students, they proposed very modest, small-scale projects. In a way, they were not really used to or not really answering the pressure of population in Dar es Salaam. We are in Belgium, there is no pressure in we live in a shrinking area, so that was a difference. The students from Dar es Salaam, they proposed more bold projects, but you could also see that their frame of references is different. The large skyscrapers, the shiny architecture, to them it represents welfare. It's what they aspire. To them, this is the future that they want to build. And it is very hard to discuss these differences in a way that you're still respectful towards each other ideas. A lot of times they told us, but you do not understand what it is to live in poverty. You do not understand what our people need. And that is something that really makes you think. But on the other hand, we've done this type of studio now for 3 years in a row, and the trust has really, we're building trust with them, so we can have open discussions about it. And to them, what we show them some things that they cannot, that in their own environment, and that they're blind for, that they cannot see anymore. So sometimes our students start from elements in their culture that they do not valid anymore, they did not value anymore, sorry. And that is what we can show them. They show us, or they try to show us how it is to live in a completely different culture and with different needs, more basic needs than our students. Yeah.
It's definitely a huge challenge, especially to work with the triangulation of the data you collect through those participatory initiatives. So what's true and what are the hidden interests of the people participating in the participatory event? And especially as a foreigner, it's very difficult to decode those things. I mean, in India, it's the whole caste system that complicates the things even more, and they don't like to talk with strangers about those situations. So So the wishes of lower caste families wouldn't get the same respect than those of higher caste families, or were even discarded just because of this aspect and so on. But that's only possibly to decode when you have local collaborators that help you to discover those aspects. And there is, as you said, there is no role model for doing such an event. I think every participatory, as you said, it has to be designed in a new way and has to be evaluated in a special way. Yeah.
Other
Thank you. I have a more fundamental question. You're always talking about local community, but what is the local community and does it exist? How do you define a local community? And is there a difference, for example, between a spatial definition, as architecture use it, and sociologists or other disciplines use it? For instance, the pariah in India, is he part of the local community or not? The people who move around, because we are in a very mobile society, do they have less rights to be interviewed or not? Are they not important? Actually, the ones you should interview is the future generation, although they do not exist, because you are building buildings, I assume, and make designs for within 10, 15, 20 years. So who is the local community? How do you define them, and what does it and it means to participation? So what is that participation? And are you not overemphasizing the importance of something that perhaps is not really clear to define and is not really clear to measure? So what does it mean? And then a last one is also, what is our Western view on local community? And is that the same as they experience it? So I assume there are a lot of information filters that we use. Of course, every effort is welcome, and I think it should be appreciated. But I think it's a bit naive to think that you capture the local community with these selective actions. So I'm just wondering, so how do you define it? And also what makes it then draw conclusions on the relativeness of your findings, knowing that perhaps there are these selective information filters?
So thank you. We have, that should be the last one, please. It's a very big
Am I the last
question.
to answer, or do we all get a chance to answer?
For
Because
all.
okay. Well, for our parallel design studio, we did not use the term local community, but we defined stakeholders in the process, and our students had to think about all the stakeholders involved in ecotourism, even themselves as tourists in Tanzania. But it's a story of investors, it's a story of policymakers, it's a story of the people who live there. Yes, so that's how we defined local community.
Thank you. I think the points you are raising are very pertinent. I think that some of them I try to talk about in one of the slides. I would say that community, it's a construction in a way that emerges sometimes during these activities. The same concern about what is a community could be applied to what is a neighbor. What is a neighborhood? What is a city? I think we are living now in a network of relationships which affects not only the social relationships but also territorial boundaries. I think this is probably our characteristic today also in our global society, this territorialization through networking. I think your concern about the limits of community could be applicable to other kind of established boundaries that we take for granted, like neighborhood, like city, and so on, right? But I think that this is one issue which I think I understand your points. I don't think as architects or planners we are not able to answer these questions. I think maybe we are able to reveal the problematic through these actions. But then the other issue of what is the scientific value of all of this, the lack of replicability that we have mentioned, that every collaborative design process has to be thought from anew, that it's difficult to apply methodology. All of this, in a way, is also kind of methodological weakness from the scientific point of view. I mean, there must be something there that we should be able to measure, to validate, to replicate, that at least we are not able to find at the moment with our projects. But I think it's also something that has to be taken care of. I think that the quest for community and to create ties with a place, to foster this sense of belonging in a way, is the other side of the coin of the globalization, as many people agree. In a way, it's like we are acting, trying to connect and back to the roots, because on the other hand, there are these forces taking us away from that. So in a way, I think community and all of these dynamics of community building, I think has to be understood into this global context, in my opinion.
Thomas, you are.
Very quickly. Of course, I have no idea what local community is, but I think what we could contribute with is to give voices to people who wouldn't be heard otherwise. So and I think that was an important aspect. In German, we have an expression, eierlegende Wollmilchsau. I don't know if you have heard that before. If I should translate it into English, it would be egg-laying wool milk pig. You know, so the animal that can everything, and architecture is not that. And of course, we cannot be this or provide this animal. But I think we can make an effort, and we can try to improve and improve and improve, and we will never reach the ultimate goal, of course. But I would rather be naive than do nothing. So I think I stop there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We are 4 and some. There are some other, but maybe that, yes.
But thank you, a round of applause for everybody, for Adalberto for moderating, and to the speakers.